Imagine, for a moment, that you're standing at the edge of a black hole. Not the fun, let's watch a sci-fi movie and pretend kind of black hole, but a real one, millions of times the mass of the sun. An object so dense that it could swallow Earth in an instant and rewrite the very fabric of reality like a cosmic editor with a permanent marker. You feel an almost electric pull, a gravitational tug that's less about being yanked and more about understanding, in some visceral way, how insignificant a single human life, or even a single planet, truly is. And as your brain struggles to wrap around this, a quiet, slightly ridiculous thought sneaks in. Maybe power isn't what we thought it was. Maybe the most powerful thing in the universe isn't even something we can punch, squeeze, or even see. Maybe it's subtle, patient, invisible, and far smarter than we are. And maybe, just maybe, it's been running the show since before we knew there was a show to run. We tend to equate power with the obvious stuff, massive explosions, armies, nuclear weapons, or hurricanes that knock your neighbor's fence over. It's tangible. You can measure it. You can complain about it over coffee. But the universe operates on scales that laugh at those definitions. Time, gravity, energy, and the fundamental forces of nature don't ask for permission, don't negotiate, and don't send invitations. They simply exist, and they rearrange everything around them while you're busy checking email or worrying about whether your houseplants are getting enough light. If the universe had a personality, it would be the kind of boss who doesn't micromanage, but just casually reshuffles entire galaxies while you wonder why your Wi-Fi is slow. Start small, in a way we can understand. Think about energy. Not the vague, I need coffee energy, but the actual physical kind that powers everything. Photons, kinetic energy, heat. The fusion reactions at the sun's core that keep life on Earth from freezing into a solid block of despair. Energy is the lifeblood of the universe. Without it, nothing happens. Stars don't shine, planets don't orbit, black holes don't lurk ominously in space. They don't exist at all. And yet, energy is invisible unless it's in motion, unless it's doing something. You can't grab a jewel in your hand, and even if you could, it would probably burn you. In that sense, energy is quietly terrifying. It is everywhere, unstoppable, and fundamentally necessary. Now take gravity. It's sneaky. It's always working, even when you forget about it. It doesn't shout, it doesn't flex, it doesn't care about your feelings. It simply binds, pulls, and bends reality itself. It forms stars, galaxies, planets, and occasionally wrecks everything spectacularly in a black hole. Gravity is patient, like the universe's passive-aggressive parent who moves pieces on the cosmic chessboard without telling anyone. Over billions of years, it sculpts the cosmos, subtly rearranging everything, from asteroid belts to galaxy clusters, with precision that humans can barely comprehend. You can fight it, sure, with a trampoline or a rocket ship, but in the grand scheme, gravity is indifferent. It's not the loudest power, but it's persistent and unavoidable, and it dictates what counts as possible anywhere in the universe. And if you think those are impressive, let's not forget time. Time is relentless. It doesn't pause for anyone, and it doesn't care about empathy or contracts. It stretches across the cosmos like a universal conveyor belt, dragging galaxies, stars, and civilizations along without consultation. Everything we consider permanent, mountains, oceans, planets, even black holes, are all temporary players on the stage of time. Over enough time, every star burns out, every planet becomes rubble, every civilization becomes dust. Time doesn't destroy to punish. It destroys because that's what exists. That kind of power isn't explosive or flashy. It's quiet, almost polite, but it wins every single round. And if you ask a human being what power feels like, time would probably nod and say, "I run everything here. You're welcome." Of course, humans are good at misunderstanding scale. We think power is about who shouts the loudest or who holds the biggest stick. But the universe doesn't recognize sticks, armies, or kingdoms. It recognizes laws. It recognizes forces. And if we start to understand the universe in its own terms, the answer to what's the most powerful thing becomes slippery, paradoxical, and slightly humbling. Because the obvious answers, energy, gravity, time, are all invisible, intangible, and terrifyingly indifferent to us. They run the show without fanfare, without applause, and without telling anyone we exist. But let's not stop there. There's also information. Not memes, not TikToks, not the fact that your neighbor knows what you had for breakfast. I mean the fundamental information that underpins reality, the way particles interact, the arrangement of quarks, the rules that govern the cosmos. Information is subtle, because it can exist without a form you can touch, see, or smell. But information shapes outcomes. Without it, there is no structure, no matter, no predictability, no universe. And the more information a system processes, the more complexity it can handle. And that, in a sense, is power. The universe itself processes information across quantum scales, across galaxies, across time. It's not doing it intentionally, of course. But if you judge power by the ability to affect change at every level simultaneously, information is absurdly potent. So far, we've talked about forces, time, energy, and information. But there's another contender that most people don't consider: entropy. Entropy is the universe's built-in chaos meter. It doesn't negotiate, it doesn't compromise, and it doesn't check your schedule. Entropy ensures that things move from order to disorder unless work is done to keep them organized. It's the reason your room eventually becomes messy, even if you're a responsible adult. Scale that up, and it's the reason stars burn out, planets age, and civilizations decline. Entropy is relentless, inevitable, and universal. It's subtle, quiet, patient, and undefeated. Humans think power is about making something happen. Entropy reminds us that the most powerful thing might be watching everything slowly unravel, unnoticed, over billions of years. Now, if you're starting to feel a little hopeless, you're supposed to. Because these powers, time, gravity, energy, entropy, are all fundamentally indifferent to our existence. They don't fight, they don't compete, they don't negotiate. And yet, they control everything. In one sense, they are simultaneously the universe's most boring and most terrifying rulers. They aren't flashy, they don't post motivational quotes, and they definitely don't host awards shows for their accomplishments. But without them, nothing exists. Nothing moves. Nothing changes. If you're looking for true power, this is it: quiet, eternal, invisible, and absolutely unavoidable. But humans, being humans, rarely stop at the subtle and abstract. We like to imagine that power is something we can hold, shape, or wield. That's why we created nukes, rockets, artificial intelligence, and billion-dollar particle colliders. And sure, these things are impressive in human terms. You can destroy a city, land a rover on Mars, or accelerate particles to near-light speed. But on the cosmic scale, they are essentially finger snaps in the theater of infinity. Nukes can't stop time. Rockets can't defy gravity forever. Colliders can't reorder entropy. And yet we call ourselves powerful because we understand the universe just enough to push back for a few seconds and feel clever about it. It's adorable, really, and slightly tragic. And that's where it gets fascinating. Because if the universe has taught us anything, it's that the most powerful thing isn't tangible. You can't hold it, touch it, see it directly, or vote it into existence. And yet it's everywhere, shaping outcomes, directing events, and setting limits on what can and cannot happen. It's the kind of power that makes your human ambitions feel simultaneously meaningful and completely irrelevant. You can build empires, launch spacecraft, invent new theories, and still, every star you admire will eventually die, every planet will drift, and every galaxy will evolve without asking if you're paying attention. Now, before you panic and decide to never pay rent again, there's a funny side to this. Humans are the universe's way of noticing its own power. The cosmos could exist perfectly well without us, and it does, but here we are, little creatures with coffee addictions and social media accounts, marveling at forces we can't control. We assign value, tell stories, measure things, and debate endlessly over what power really means. And in a way, that's the universe's most remarkable trick. It creates observers capable of reflecting on it, even if those observers are completely inconsequential in the grand scheme. So, what's the most powerful thing in the universe? The simple answer is everything you can't see and can't fight, and which still shapes everything you can see and do. Time, entropy, gravity, energy, and information, all quiet, relentless, invisible, and absolute. But the slightly cheeky answer, from a human perspective, is that we are also witnesses to that power. We notice it, we study it, we try to measure it, and we tell stories about it. In our own small, fleeting way, that ability to comprehend the incomprehensible is a kind of power too, a temporary, fragile, hilarious, and wonderful echo of the universe's own might. And if you've been following along, you're the kind of person who enjoys stepping back and realizing how small you are, while also appreciating how curious and persistent humans can be. Stick around, because we're going to take that curiosity further, exploring the extremes of energy, the quirks of black holes, the mind-bending effects of relativity, and the almost philosophical implications of forces that dominate everything we know. And maybe along the way, we'll laugh a little at our own tiny ambitions while trying to measure the unmeasurable. Let's take a step deeper, beyond abstractions like energy, time, and entropy, and look at how these forces actually manifest in the universe in ways that make even the most confident humans reconsider their assumptions about what power really means. Consider, for instance, a neutron star. These objects are born when massive stars die in supernova explosions, leaving cores so dense that a sugar cube-sized piece would weigh as much as Mount Everest. They spin, they generate magnetic fields trillions of times stronger than anything we can produce, and they emit radiation with pinpoint precision that can be measured across light years. In other words, they are tiny, absurdly dense, and quietly absolute in their dominance. If you fell onto a neutron star, your body wouldn't just be crushed, it would cease to exist in a way that's hard to emotionally process. And yet, these stars don't brag. They just exist, and in existing, they outperform anything humans might imagine as powerful. Then there's the black hole, which we touched on earlier. Not only do black holes warp space and time around them, but they also feed on stars, light, and even other black holes, growing into supermassive monsters at the hearts of galaxies. A supermassive black hole can hold billions of times the mass of the Sun, warping orbits and dictating the motion of entire star systems without ever sending an RSVP to say, "I'm the boss now." And if that isn't humbling enough, the event horizon, the point of no return, is a boundary where the rules of physics, as we know them, start bending in ways that would make a mathematician cry and a sci-fi author giddy. The sheer magnitude of their influence is almost comically disproportionate. They do nothing but exist, yet everything around them behaves according to their presence. That, if nothing else, is power so absolute it borders on absurdity. Power in the universe often manifests as extremes rather than subtlety. Gamma-ray bursts, for example, are like the universe sneezing with a force that could, if it happened close enough, sterilize an entire planet. One of these bursts can release more energy in a few seconds than the sun will produce in its entire 10 billion year lifetime. And unlike human explosions, which are impressive in their way but local, gamma-ray bursts are indiscriminate and utterly indifferent. They are proof that the universe doesn't care about scale in the way we do. The Earth looks tiny in their light, our accomplishments insignificant, and our sense of control entirely comical. And yet, the gamma-ray burst is not conscious. It doesn't decide to be powerful. It simply is, and the consequences unfold naturally. If we're measuring power by consequence rather than intent, these cosmic events make human notions of control look almost laughable. We struggle to imagine forces that can, in an instant, reshape galaxies, erase life, or bend the very fabric of space-time, all without malice, design, or fanfare. And yet, in some ways, this is exactly what makes the universe so interesting. There's a strange kind of thrill in asking a question you're not entirely sure you want the answer to, and this one arrives with the same nervous energy as opening a closet you've been ignoring for years because something inside might fall on your head. Not dangerous, just concerning. The question is simple enough on the surface. What if Earth's first civilization wasn't us? Not metaphorically, not spiritually. I mean literally, What if someone else reached intelligence and built a society long before humans ever got the chance? And if they did, where did they go? Why isn't there a trace? Why isn't their version of a Starbucks cup buried somewhere in the fossil record? You'd think we'd see something. A tool, a structure, a very confused skeleton wearing sunglasses. But nature is annoyingly good at cleaning up after itself. Earth doesn't keep receipts. Given enough time, this planet will erase anything we build the same way it erases your footprints at the beach. Slowly at first, then suddenly. And when you realize that 99.999% of Earth's history unfolded long before humans showed up, it feels almost arrogant to assume we're the first ones who figured out how to stack rocks or reinvent stress. But in case you're tempted to roll your eyes and declare the idea too weird for your taste, remember that the universe itself is already weird. It's not taking applications for normal. And once you throw the great filter hypothesis into the mix, the idea that somewhere between lifeless chemistry and galaxy-spanning civilization, something extremely difficult stands in the way, things stop feeling hypothetical and start feeling suspicious. Because if the great filter is real, then either humanity already passed it, is currently staring right at it with no clue what it is, or hasn't hit it yet and probably shouldn't schedule any long-term plans. And if we didn't pass it, maybe someone else did. Maybe they got far. Maybe they built wonders. Maybe they became the galaxy's next big thing. But maybe, just maybe, they started right here, and something erased them before we ever knew they existed. That thought has a way of settling in your chest like a heavy book you're not sure you want to open, but can't walk away from. And here you are, opening it anyway. This entire question becomes even stranger when you realize how old Earth really is. Somehow the planet has been spinning around for 4.5 billion years, and for most of that time, absolutely nothing was happening except lava, bacteria, and what I like to call the extremely long patience phase of evolution. Modern humans have only existed for about 300,000 years. Civilization, cities, writing, agriculture, barely scratches 6,000. That's not even a rounding error on the cosmic timescale. If Earth's history were a 24-hour day, humans would appear at 11:59 and 59 seconds p.m., looking around and confidently declaring, "We must be the first." So when people argue that another intelligent species couldn't have existed here before us because there's no evidence, it's like someone checking a beach for 5 seconds, not seeing a seashell, and concluding none have ever existed. Humans haven't even dug into 1% of the planet's surface. The ocean floor is a mystery. The deep crust is basically a locked room we've only peeked into. And anything older than a few million years has already been recycled by plate tectonics, erosion, and time itself. If you ever feel like your accomplishments don't matter, just remember that Earth treats everything the same way. It deletes it. Comforting and existential at the same time. But this whole question becomes much more interesting when we ask something slightly bolder. What would an earlier civilization even look like? Not their ruins, because time would have taken care of those, but their capabilities, their ideas, their trajectory. If they weren't human, they might have built things differently, used materials that didn't last, developed sciences that left behind no durable artifacts. Maybe their version of advanced wasn't metallic skyscrapers or satellites in orbit. Maybe it was biological, symbiotic, acoustic, chemical. Maybe it left behind nothing identifiable because we're not even asking the right questions about what to look for. This is where the great filter sneaks in again, not dramatically, just tapping you on the shoulder like, "Hey, remember me?" Because if the great filter represents a stage so hard to pass that most civilizations fail, then whatever may have lived on Earth before us could have hit that wall hard. And instead of leaving behind a legacy, maybe they left behind a cautionary tale written in the universal language of absence. Humanity might not be the first species to try building a future here. We might just be the first with a shot at noticing the pattern. But the possibility that something else came before us doesn't automatically mean it reached space or mastered physics or discovered how to ruin its sleep schedule with glowing rectangles. They may have been intelligent in a way we wouldn't immediately recognize. Dolphins, for example, have language and social structures so complex that if they had hands instead of fins, they would have become landlords by now. Octopuses are practically aliens already, with brains that operate in ways we barely understand. And that's just the present-day cast. Earth has had millions of species over hundreds of millions of years. Plenty of time for intelligence to arise, fade, arise again, and disappear without leaving a neat, museum-ready trail for us to follow. This leads you to a broader realization that intelligence isn't a straight evolutionary ladder with humans at the top like some triumphant, slightly confused cosmic manager. It's a branching network, full of experiments, dead ends, wild successes, and even wilder failures. If intelligence evolved once, why not twice? Why not a dozen times? Why not in eras so far back that the continents were in different places, the sky had different stars, and the ecosystem looked like something a CGI studio might turn down for being too unrealistic? Maybe the first civilization lived in a period we barely study outside of dinosaur documentaries. Maybe they looked nothing like us. Maybe they thought nothing like us. Maybe their version of intelligence focused on cooperation rather than competition, or intuition rather than logic, or communication rather than invention. And maybe that made them brilliant, or vulnerable, or both. Now here's the uncomfortable twist. We tend to assume that civilizations expand outward, becoming louder, brighter, more noticeable over time. But what if the opposite is true? What if power is everywhere, invisible and indifferent, shaping everything? It's a neutron star, a black hole, entropy, time, information, and the patterns life itself creates to amplify small effects into observable consequences. And yet, the fact that we notice, analyze, and even joke about these forces is perhaps the strangest form of power of all. The ability to recognize magnitude beyond our scale, to marvel at forces that would otherwise leave us indifferent, and to feel awe, fear, and wonder at our own small but conscious existence. And as we move forward, there's more to explore. We can dive into how these powers interact, how they scale across the cosmos, and how, in combination, subtle forces can rival or surpass brute strength and influence. We can examine the tension between inevitability and agency, chaos and order, and explore the almost poetic implications of being a conscious species in a universe that is supremely powerful, yet delightfully indifferent. As we zoom out even further, the conversation about power in the universe starts to look less like a list of forces and more like a story about relationships between energy and matter, time and entropy, intelligence and environment. The universe isn't just a collection of isolated forces. It's an interconnected system where the seemingly most innocuous elements can exert influence in ways that dwarf our imaginations. A tiny change in a star's core can ripple across light years, altering the formation of planets, the chemistry of interstellar clouds, and the future of life in ways no single intelligence could foresee. In that sense, power is relational, emergent, and sometimes invisible until it manifests on a scale that makes the human brain throw its hands up in defeat. Consider dark energy, which we only discovered because the universe refuses to sit still. It's responsible for accelerating cosmic expansion, slowly pushing galaxies apart at speeds that defy everyday logic. We can't see it, we can't touch it, and we barely understand it. Yet it shapes the ultimate fate of the universe. In billions of years, it may tear galaxies, stars, and planets apart, or at least ensure they drift so far from one another that meaningful interaction becomes impossible. That kind of power is absurdly patient, operating on scales so vast that we can only perceive the tiniest hints. It's like the universe's ultimate passive-aggressive roommate, rearranging furniture while you sleep, and you'll never notice until it's too late. Meanwhile, black holes continue to astonish. Supermassive ones at the centers of galaxies control orbital dynamics with a calm, unblinking authority. They don't care about civilization, life, or opinion polls. They only obey the rules of mass, gravity, and time. And yet, paradoxically, these same objects also shape the formation of stars and galaxies, indirectly nurturing environments where life, tiny, fragile, and often unaware, can arise. They are both destroyers and enablers, a cosmic duality that defies our tendency to simplify power into good or bad. They exist in a kind of elegant balance, demonstrating that power in the universe is often subtle, indirect, and almost impossible to categorize. And what about life itself? On a tiny pale blue dot orbiting an unremarkable star, organisms have figured out ways to harness energy, process information, and manipulate matter. From single-celled organisms photosynthesizing sunlight to humans building machines that manipulate subatomic particles, life demonstrates that power isn't always about mass or brute force. It can be about control, adaptability, and strategy. A beaver building a dam doesn't alter the galaxy, but it changes the river, the ecosystem, and the local energy flows. Multiply that across millions of species, billions of years, and you start to see a form of power that is quiet but cumulative, subtle but transformative, patient but persistent. And humans, well, we are hilarious in our approach to this cosmic game. We obsess over power in immediate, tangible ways: political influence, wealth, technology, and sometimes, for reasons unknown even to us, viral social media posts. And yet, in the grand scheme, these things matter almost nothing. We live for moments, lifespans, centuries at most, while the universe stretches forward in eons. We measure, calculate, and control what we can, which is admittedly cute and admirable, but from the perspective of a black hole or dark energy, we are tiny and ephemeral. It's as if a flea were rearranging sand on a beach and declaring itself the ruler of tides. And still, our awareness, our curiosity, and our attempts to measure and understand these forces, those are uniquely ours. That's our power, to recognize and engage with forces that dwarf us, and to laugh at our own absurdity in the process. Imagine now combining all these forces: time, entropy, gravity, energy, information, dark energy, and intelligence. Each on its own is astounding. Together, they create a dynamic, interacting system of immense complexity. Sometimes, the universe seems almost sentient in its patterns, though it almost certainly isn't. Galaxies rotate, stars form and die, matter clumps and disperses, and life arises, adapts, and disappears, all as a consequence of these interacting forces. Power is no longer about a single object or phenomenon. It's about interplay. The most powerful thing may not be a single entity, but the way all of reality coordinates itself across time and space, often in ways that produce outcomes even the universe cannot predict in detail. This interplay gives rise to fascinating thought experiments. Imagine a civilization advanced enough to harness stellar energy directly, manipulate gravity, or even redirect cosmic flows. From our perspective, that would be godlike power. And yet, even then, they would be constrained by the universe's fundamental rules. Time would still pass, entropy would still rise, and dark energy would still push galaxies apart. Absolute power is impossible, because the universe itself enforces limits. But relative power, power over local circumstances, power over energy flows, power over information and matter, is achievable and breathtaking in scope. It's a humbling combination, awe-inspiring, yet always bounded. And herein lies a peculiar human twist. We define power in terms of control, yet the universe operates in terms of inevitability. Gravity acts whether we notice, entropy increases whether we approve, and time marches on whether we study it or not. The most powerful things are invisible, indifferent, patient, and unstoppable, but we recognize them precisely because they are measurable, predictable, and interpretable. In that sense, understanding is itself a kind of power, tiny, fragile, and fleeting, yet capable of influencing how we act in the face of forces we cannot control. Curiosity, reflection, and insight become tools to engage with cosmic power indirectly. We can't stop a black hole, but we can detect its gravitational waves. We can't slow dark energy, but we can model its effects. And in doing so, we participate in a small, absurd dance with forces that would otherwise operate without notice. Humor, it turns out, is another way humans navigate power. Recognizing our own limitations allows us to joke, reflect, and marvel. We laugh at memes about black holes, at viral videos of astronauts floating in zero gravity, at our attempts to categorize an infinite, indifferent universe with finite brains and finite attention spans. It's not trivial, it's an acknowledgement of perspective. Humor becomes a kind of resistance to overwhelming scale, a way to assert consciousness against forces that would otherwise render us irrelevant. In other words, laughing at the universe is both human and a subtle form of engagement with power itself. And then there's speculation. What if power could be understood differently entirely? What if the most potent force is not gravity, entropy, or energy, but consciousness itself, the ability to perceive, to interpret, and to act? We don't bend stars with our thoughts, but we create meaning, alter trajectories on local scales, and communicate ideas that can ripple across generations. A single insight can redirect society, transform ecosystems, or launch civilizations into space. Consciousness translates understanding into action, creating influence that is cumulative and far-reaching, even if dwarfed by the raw scale of the universe. And humor, our ability to see absurdity and adapt, is part of that power too, a tiny but uniquely human way to navigate overwhelming forces. In the end, we come back to perspective. On one level, the most powerful things in the universe are fundamental, invisible, and eternal: gravity, time, entropy, energy, and information. On another level, power manifests in subtle, emergent, relational ways: life, intelligence, adaptation, and consciousness. On yet another level, our own reflection, curiosity, and humor allow us to recognize these forces and participate in a dialogue with them, however tiny our role may be. The universe is vast, indifferent, and infinitely more complex than we are, yet somehow we exist to witness, study, and marvel at it. That, in itself, is remarkable, absurd, and profoundly powerful in a way that defies conventional definitions. So next time you look up at the night sky, think not about what humans can do or control, but about the immense, patient forces operating quietly above and around us. Appreciate their scale, their inevitability, and their subtlety. Laugh at our own attempts to understand and measure them. And recognize that in the act of noticing, studying, and reflecting, we engage with power itself, not in the cosmic sense of moving stars or bending space-time, but in the uniquely human sense of understanding, witnessing, and participating in a universe that is both indifferent and spectacular. In that way, the most powerful thing in the universe is both everywhere and nowhere, absolute and relative, invisible yet undeniable. It is the forces that shape everything, and the consciousness that contemplates them. And if you've been following this journey, marveling, laughing, and questioning along the way, consider subscribing to keep exploring, because curiosity itself might just be the most potent tool we have to understand and participate in the cosmic game. The universe is relentless, eternal, and overwhelming, but here we are, thinking about it, laughing at it, and learning from it. That, oddly enough, may be the universe's greatest trick of all.